because we can't quite internalize it. So we're like right there with our minds. We've come to a place of through exerted effort and time, but till the point of isamtus, of a truth of it, and a truth that you relate to, you recognize, and that creates a tremendous yearning and aching. That's a chelas ava. But this is all, of course, high levels of avoda and riyah. That was then what we learned yesterday. The second paragraph, the paragraph that begins on page 1200, he began by speaking about now. V'hine, there's chayla gematria memtes, and that is actually not that riyah causes your ache, the love sickness. It's the lack of riyah that causes the chayla sava. That you reach 49 levels gematria chayla, but you can't touch and you can't access the 50th. And that's what creates the chayla. She'ena b'alei dei b'chinas riyah. So clearly this is a lower level, because riyah is to reach a level of riyah, of visual, of envisioning, is quite a high level. Now he's talking about reaching 49 stages of understand, the gates of understanding, memtes, but you're lacking sabina, but you're lacking the riyah of chachma, the bridge, the 50th gate that bridges between bina and chachma. So you have bina, you have an understanding. The bina comes from chachma. It originates obviously in the spark of a concept of chachma, of that flash, but because you quite can't get over that 50th gate, to the 50th gate, it creates a chelasav. He calls that chelizuhi bedakos. This so-called illness or this lack that causes you to feel a cheli is basically bria not able to go to atzilus. The words that he used, atzilus is chachma and bria is bin. So chelizuhi bedakos. So you have an understanding of the idea, but you have it from a distance, like you hear it, not like you're visualizing it. And this cheli is bedakos. That was that. Now he said, Am omnam mavur b'mokam. He brings now another place where it discusses a cheli that's far more, I don't say the word crass, but far more blatant. Not just the subtle element, you're missing the 50th gate. And here we're talking about that as a lack of the riyah, that once the Jewish people, when they stood by Mount Sinai and they heard the Aser Sadibris during Matan Torah, they had a riyah reimes akelis. Now they descended from that place. So since now they only have shmiyah, not riyah, the words he uses, they descended from that when you have this taklus and riyah, you no way, because you're so mesmerized and so taken by what you're experiencing. You're seeing Reyes HaMelech Be'enov, you see the king with your eyes. That was by Matan Torah. But then, once that riyah of Chachma diminished, and they went to the state of Mechinas Riyah, Mechinas Shmiyah, meaning it's no longer that powerful experience of seeing it before your own eyes, that led them, that caused them to be able to sin, because once you don't have Chachma, you have your Musu, and that's Chela Mamish. A sin is an actual illness. A sin isn't just a lack of the 50th gate, or even higher, that you're seeing everything, you're just not able to contain or be fulfilled by it. Okay. Now, he went further, and this breaks it down even further. He says now the Inyan in this is, and that's what we're middle of learning, is starting with an example of illness in a physical sense. That you see in physical illness two types. One we'll call an emotional aching, which is a person sees something, uses the example from the Gemara, that is someone that he has an obsession. He sees something that causes him to be obsessed with it. So this is not an illness that you can call an injury to the body or a disease or a sickness. It's more of an emotional, psychological obsession, which can make a person sick. There's no question about it. So that's one. Then there's a thing called kilkule varav, where the limbs or the actual body are ill, to the point that he says, I'm going to go through the details. He's bedridden with high fever, and his taste gets all skewed. That he loses his taste to the point that which is bitter, that which is sweet tastes bitter, and that which is bitter tastes sweet, to the point that he actually can desire bad and destructive foods. Like the example of ashes or coals or charcoal, pchamim. Most likely ashes is probably the best translation at this point. Okay. And now, what are these two types of illness? Remember, we'll get back to the Cheta Egel and the higher levels of Cheli that he spoke about. But now you see he's bringing it down to far more, unfortunately, relatable levels to us, where we can actually experience this type of illness spiritually. So these are the physical forms. So two forms. One is a person gets obsessed with something and it makes them, just completely consumes them. And that's illness. Another is an actual physical illness to the point that we just said. High fever, lack of taste, and so on. What is that in Ruchnius, in Aveda? So the first one, he actually did not spell out. Unless he did. 1 second, let me see. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, he did. Now it seems like he's going back to what was the earlier paragraph. Because remember, the chela that's 49 is lack of seeing. So now he's saying, if you see something, in this case, you're seeing godliness with your mind, but you can't quite be fulfilled by it, you can't contain it, that creates a chela. So he says that's an example for the first type of cheli gashmi, which is someone that sees something and gets obsessed with it to the point that they get sick. As the Gemara says, uses a negative example, but still the idea is there. Just brings to mind something. I don't know if I should confuse it with I don't want to create any confusion. I'll bring it later. It's just going to confuse matters. Now we talk about another cheli, which actually physically is like an injury or an illness. I wouldn't say injury, because he just says kilkul evri aguf. It could be an injury, but kilkul evri aguf most likely, because it comes with high fever and all that, most likely an illness. A person has a cold. So what is that in Aveda? So he says that in Aveda is a very different type of cheli. It's not that you're seeing something and you're consumed with it. Like we spoke about chela sava, that you see something and you consume with it. Now we're talking the other extreme, that this is now the nefesh habamis. That would be the nefesh alikis most likely. Nefesh alikis contemplates on the divine to the point that you become so close to it, but you can't have it, so you get sick from it. Now he's talking about the cheli, where he says, and this is now the aveda. The ruchnis bechela nefesh. I'm going to go over. We learned that. I'll just go. Bizgabrus ezor. Like the fever, the high fever. What is that in the nimshal, in the moral of aveda? That there's a bizgabrus, an intensity, an overwhelming or dominant, strange or alien fire, passion, v'chemativi, and natural heat, which means you're very passionate. Of an animal soul, the animal soul is very passionate about its desires. And what kind of desires? Well, let me read it properly. With the overwhelming power or the dominance of the strange or alien fire and natural heat or natural passion of the animal soul that burns within him. And what is it burning with? Passions too, but is zoris in alien, meaning non-godly desires. Elam, and the pettiness or the emptiness or the nonsense of this world. Havle Elam usually means the pedestrian materialism of this world that's empty. Like Havle from the word hevel. Empty, like breath, like air. And b'inyani elam haza, and he immerses himself. He delves deeply into the matters of this material world. But taivas zaris. Now he's using taivas before he used ritzenis zaris, desire, strange or alien desires. Now he's using desire, taivas, which is desires. But before it was ritzenis, will. Now taivas zaris. The kol chefse v'ritzenis lezeh, and his entire desire and will is invested in, is directed toward this. U'mashem shachuch libay, and his heart has forgotten God, or from God his heart has wandered away. Shachuch libay, his heart is basically forgotten about God at this time. We read this, but I'm reading it again. Hipanu alai erif, you're showing your back to me. So panu would be someone is panu, like when you panu, you present yourself, you're requesting something. You know, when someone says, I'm approaching you to ask you for something, or I'm approaching you, here you're approaching God with your back. It's, in other words, usually you go over to a king, you walk with face to the king. Imagine walking backwards. That's somebody that's turning their back on God, basically. The Gama Shepanu Elai Hu B'Chinas Erev. In other words, also, and here, as I said, it could mean that even when you're standing close, or even when you're directing yourself to God, it's with your back. So that's obviously you're turning your back because your face and your interests are elsewhere. So Panu Elai Hu B'Chinas Erev B'Chinas Acharayim. It's like the back. Acharayim is that it's secondary. It's acharayim meaning, how do you translate acharayim? The back. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya uses the example that when you give a gift to a friend, you give it to them like this. But if you throw it over your shoulder, it's a very dismissive and a very obviously insulting fact. So there he's talking about how the klippas get energy. Now he's talking about the person is in that state where they're basically ignoring God, and even worse, like showing their back. Where is his tainug? Avla tainug b'inyan elamaza. Where is his pleasure? Where is he? What is he facing? And what is he presenting? Where is his front? Basically, the front is now directed toward the inyan elam haza.
Will you take any questions before you move on to the new part? This is where we stopped.
Where we stopped, actually. One second. I'll fine, we will. Let me just say. So we stopped here, line 3, and now we're going to continue going further. So yes, if you want to ask questions, go ahead.
I just want to clarify. Is it saying here that when a person goes to this dark place, or this place in the Nefesh Behema, where the Nefesh Behema takes over the person, and they go astray into these mundane desires,
strange pastures.
Strange thank you. Is it to say that this is what happens when someone takes their bina and, like you say, goes off the reservation? Meaning, let's say they take the ria, the avas cholas ava that they should have. That meaning that they're lacking something. They want God, but they've gone off the reservation. They've taken it to a different place, which is the opposite of what they really need. Their neshama needs a locus, but instead they went off the reservation, having a lack. They went to delve into this world to find something to quench it. Is that something you suggested?
I wouldn't suggest that at this point. This seems to be a lot lower than that. That's a higher level, it seems to me. But you know what? I would wait and see how this develops before commenting fully.
Because
so right now, it's too much processing, I think, at this point. Because
I was going to say it's pretty mind blowing. If you think about it, it's mind blowing. Take the Inyan of adultery, God forbid, and why is there so much? Why does it plague our society? And in other words, it seems to be a common behavior. They say over 50%.
But I'm just suggesting that before we go there, we should learn more, because this is too much applying and processing, I think, at this stage.
Oh, I thought there was some suggestion that this was a that off the derech of the first type of ahava. So I was trying to.
That may be the root of it. That may be the root, but he hasn't said it. And I would right now just stick to understanding. He's describing a real problem, which is describing the animal soul's distraction by this world and its obsession with it. I wouldn't connect it to Bina and Chachma at this point at all.
Okay, all right, thank you.
He may not. I don't know where it's going to go, whether it's rooted there in a subtle way or not, but we'll see. I would right now be patient. Let's learn further and let's see how he ties it all together.
So is asking Hashem for Gashmistic Tanugim Panu Alai Eiref?
It depends what you're asking for. If you're asking to serve God with living a prosperous and successful life, great. But if you're asking just to indulge your animal soul in its own desires, are you going to ask God to forget about God? He says clearly, this is a state where you're forgetting about God. This basically, let's not overanalyze. This is the not. If you want to analyze seeing God,
I just wanted to clarify
this
that.
This is the world in which we live. This is our actual world that most of us are unfortunately trapped in. No, so this is not about praying to God. Let's not read more into it. He's saying it very clearly. This is the animal soul at its best, so to speak, seeking out personal selfish indulgences and desires and ignoring God. Don't read deeper into that. It's very straightforward what he's saying here.
I'm just the words Panu Elai, returning to Hashem.
No? Panu Elai means
you're turning with the oiref.
Yeah, you're back. You're turning your back to God. That's what it means.
Okay.
Don't read deeper into it than what he's saying. That you could be standing there.
You forget.
Exactly. Okay, Valzen Nemar. Let's continue. Oh, we're going to need your help, Rab Shleima. Which pasuk is this?
It's in Echo.
Weiter Echo. A lot of Echo here.
Because this world is all Hevel.
No, that's Kehelis.
You're right. Sorry. Okay, you're right. Sorry.
Echa is lamentations. It's worse than Kehelis.
Yes, of course. I got excited.
One second. No, which pasuk before was from Echa? I don't remember already. Okay. Yesterday there was another pasuk. Just wondering if they come together.
What
does that mean?
The way that I understand is the that are putting their faith, their habits, their ali toilo and toilo miloshen teilas.
Teilas, like a worm.
Yeah. So they hugging.
They're embracing zeva, like garbage.
Yeah.
Can someone look it up just to see the translation?
I'll try to find it.
Yeah, if you can find a translation, would be really good, because I want to see how he's using it. I mean, I know the concept. What?
Echo perek dalet pasuk hey.
Okay, I see the translation.
Oh.
Those who used to eat dainties are perishing in the streets, that they were reared on crimson clasp the dunghills.
Well, this is on Chabad. Oh, sorry, Safaria translates it as those who feasted on dainties lie famished in the streets. Those who were reared in purple have embraced refuse heaps.
Say that again, the second half.
Those who were raised in purple, meaning royalty, have embraced refuse heaps. So those who feasted on really nice food, now they lie starving in the streets. And those who wore purple, the royal garbs, have embraced refuse heaps, meaning they're living in squalor, in garbage.
Okay, got it. So he says, "Zewa umni malai teleach chavku."
האמונים עלי טוילו, חיבקו אשפתס.
Okay.
Ale Taila is silk.
So Taylor is a color here. It's like a tchelis.
Like Toilas Shoni.
Correct.
Toilas Shoni.
Toilas Shoni, rather, right.
The beautiful.
Crimson or, right, okay. So those
Safaria
that were
says
reared,
purple.
Okay. So those that were reared.
Explaining here very beautiful that the people that are used to dvorim nifloim v'niskovim, very high things, Torah, Chassidus, Avashem, Yirashem, bein adam l'chaveiro, dvorim arevim, nifloim. But
that's the first half. He doesn't bring the first half of the puzzle. Okay, let me continue.
I find myself again and again that I'm.
Okay. One second. We got the translation. Let me continue teaching here. Okay. He doesn't bring the first half of the verse. He only brings the second half. That those that were reared, grew up in Teleia, meaning in royalty, as you said, good way. Now they're embracing and now they're living in squalor. They're living in garbage, basically. Shehem, what is this garbage referring to? Shem kol tainuga elam haza. These are all the pleasures of this material world. Shesharshan v'savusan, their root and their creation, who mebchinas pselis hashpa, are coming from the waste of the hashpa, of the divine transmission, hanikra ashpa, which is called garbage. Let me explain what that means. This goes back to the Tanya. There's a question asked by the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists. How does God create these lowly desires in this world when everything ein ra yered mulmayla, evil does not come from above, everything is a divine energy. So how does a divine, beautiful energy, you can say here, how can a kingly, majestic soul come to a place where it starts desiring literally things that are completely anti-God? So there's a lot of discussion on this, especially the Ramak and others. And the Kabbalim explain, we understand that Tzimtzumim, but the Tzimtzum only explains the concealment of the divine. It still doesn't explain.
Can Rabbi Weingarten please mute? Because I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying. There's a baby crying. Thank you, Rabbi Weingarten.
Yeah. Okay. So Tzimtzum explains how the divine is concealed and leaves space independent for an independent consciousness, but it still needs to be explained. How can you have something opposite of God? That someone should, instead of, you could say, you know what, I don't focus on God because God is concealed. So it goes further that the divine energy, as it manifests, sends energy into this world and creates everything that we know. So we could say that energy is concealed from us. So when we look at mineral or vegetation or animal, human being, or anything in existence, so in Atzilus, the divine is revealed. So all the spheres, Chochmah through Malchus, are all aligned to godliness. But in Asiya Gashmis, in the world of Tachtenim, we don't see the godliness. So we see an independent world. But then comes the next step. The fact that we can use it for something opposite of God is obviously the Tzimtzum. Without the Tzimtzum, there would be no such potential. Because if divine energy, divine consciousness was present and conscious in our minds and our experience, there'd be no room for us doing something that God does not want. There'd be no room for self-indulgence and all these desires and all these taivas he's talking about. The fact that human beings can go about their day and their lives indulging in their own thing is only possible because of the concealment. But it goes further. The concealment, as we learned, is not just that it conceals the divine, it also conceals the divine within existence. And at the same time, energy is still flowing, that when you're indulging in something, there is energy there. So how is that explained? So it's explained because the energy that God flows into this existence has it diverges into two paths. One is energy that goes into what we call klipas nega, which means the food we eat, the drink, the businesses we run, the money we make, the material world. But that, as Tanya explains, does not necessarily mean it's evil. It just means it can go both directions. How does it go into the wrong direction? So there, the divine energy now is not just concealed, it's the energy that's flowing into it is like the energy that you invest when you're expelling waste from your body. But it's waste. So in other words, there is energy in pselis, but it's the most minimalistic amount of energy. And that's why the negative forces can come and feed off of that. Like you see, when a human being is alive, you're not going to find maggots, God forbid, and other insects come and start infesting a human being unless there's a real problem. Once a body dies, okay, the body, what happens? It no longer has the protection of that revealed, that energy. So what happens is all the parasites come to gather, to feed off of it. So the same as an analogy in Ruchnius, the energy that divine is an energy that God gives every human being. We have life. Even our nefesh abamis, which is klipas nega, is getting divine life. But once a person, once that energy begins to get very weak, it's still there, but it doesn't have enough to protect. So this is what we call the energy that comes in the form of pselis. It's called v'nikra ashpa. That it's the creation of it is mepchinas pselis. It's only the waste. It's only the very minimal amount of energy. It's like you say, just to use an astronomic example from astronomy, the light of the sun comes to the earth perfect. We have just enough sunlight to maintain existence. If the sun was too close, it would burn things up. If it was too distant, we would freeze. But then there are the outer recesses of outer space. They get a speck of sunlight. And it's really freezing cold over there. So the same thing is here. The divine energy affected by the tzimtzum is not just concealed, but there are parts of it that are so minimalistic, and that's called the savusim ebchinas pselis. It comes from the waste of the divine, kavyachol, so to speak. So the examples Kabbalah uses is just like a person expels waste. The same thing in godly energy, once it gets so diminished, it's called acharayim. Mebchinas acharayim is getting energy from the acharayim. So whenever we talk about klipa and sitra achra, we talk about negative forces like Paroi, Hitler, Yamach Shemai, and so on. They're getting energy, they're alive. But how could God be giving energy to such people who are using it in the most anti-godly type of way? So the answer is the energy is so minimalistic there. They're getting energy, but it's very so concealed from the divine that it can be used in this fashion. So this is what he calls waste or garbage.
Why should you say that the energy is legal? One
second. So Baal Pa'ir was an Avodah Zarah that they actually worshipped dung. They worshipped waste. Can you imagine? You know, one thing is you want to worship a golden calf, the sun, the moon, something that has at least some majestic quality. It's true, it's Avodah Zarah, but at least imagine people worshiping dung, waste. So Chassidus explains that is the example of you're worshiping, literally your values have become so corrupt that you're worshiping something that we would call waste. It's waste of waste. It's not even worshiping a king. You're worshiping something of value. So the Chassidus talks at length about Baal Pa'er and different Maimorim that talk about that element of Achirayim. So he's really talking about the lowest of the low right now, very low, which is basically ultimate illness, where a person is completely consumed with waste, which comes from the most from the minutest energy that's so concealed that can even give energy to this type of level. So basically, we're worshiping waste when we are when we're indulging in this material world. That's the punchline. You want to say or ask something?
Yeah, you don't have to say that the energy is a minimal energy. It's godly energy, but these people are taking this energy and using it in such a negative way.
I'll tell you why, because I was explaining the line where it says, Kol tainuga elam hazeh shesharshan v'savusum b'chinas pseilus hashpa. That's why I said that. Because it says clearly it's coming from the waste of the hashpa lekis. So in other words, it's exactly what the pasuk says in Iyov, that those that were reared and grew up in majesty, in royalty, are now where their heads, where their beings, they're in garbage. So what's the royalty here? But pashtus, it's elikus. It's like a nefesh lekis, where you're taking what he says in Tanya, you're taking the head of the king and sticking it into waste, into a toilet, basically.
Somebody is describing it, that this is feeding his personality exactly. He's getting inspired by godliness, but then he found himself in the low things.
Well, first of all, he does not say that here. He did not say that here. I would not say that right now. To me, this could be the Golus Neshama. Let's continue on. Let's continue on.
Real quick question in terms of clarification of terms. Chinas Achoraim, is that sort of in the same realm as Sitra Achra? Is that why you brought it?
He says here Achoraim.
I'm asking, is that synonymous with Sitra Achra?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So he's explained what means high fever in the illness. A person has high fever. This is the high state of passion and burning desire for all the matters of the garbage of this world, which is the pseilus, compared to obviously godliness, the opposite of godliness. Now he's going to explain what does it mean that the taste has been altered, that the taste of this person who's ill has been disturbed. He says, "V'zehu shetoya mosuk lemar," that he tastes the sweetness to him is like bitter. What is that? The b'chinas hamesikus v'atainug eliki. That means that the state of sweetness and divine pleasure, einei chayfetz b'zeh. He does not desire it. This is what it means. That which is sweet, he's not interested in. He's not desiring. V'hamar, and the bitterness, shein kol hanois gashmim, all the physical pleasures, which is really bitter, if you compare it to the truth of divine pleasure, huloi lemasuk, that is sweet for him. So he's basically saying that means that which is truly bitter is tasting sweet for him, even though he started shetoyim masuk lemar, which really means that sweet is tasting bitter. So I guess it means like this: godliness, which is truly sweet, is tasting bitter, and the world, the pleasures of this world, which is really bitterness, is for him sweet. So everything's been turned upside down. The true pleasures, the true permanent and divine pleasures are bitter when they're really sweet, and that which is really bitter is for him sweet. Umisave l'dvarim hamazikim lenafshe. Now he's using the next step of the example. Remember, he said furthermore that he actually is desiring things that are destructive to him. So he's actually taking destructive behavior and turning it into something that's become his thing that he's craving. Basically, when you see anybody doing things that are destructive, whether it could be addictions, it could be obsessions, it could be seductions, it could be sexual, it could be of other nature, other forms of obsessions, these are all what he's calling here destructive things that have now become, that a person thinks is good for him. and pursuing it. So he says, "V'zehu b'chinas cheli gamur." This is what we call a total illness. Not what we called earlier cheli bedakus, subtle lack of the divine, which yes makes him also love sickness. But this is actually I don't want to use the word, but it's a sick individual in the sense that he's a spirit, a cancer in Avodas Hashem has now consumed him. That's the equivalent of what we're describing here. So a person whose life is directed toward everything that is opposite of what godliness is. So it's very sustenance. Where he's supposed to be getting his life from, he's ignoring and indulging in the material world, as he just described at length here. Okay, so this is not very pleasant. And this is quite the other extreme of what we've been learning. But the Rebbe Rashab made it clear that he's moving over to cheli that's not just on a very subtle or spiritual level, but this is a real cheli. This is the equivalent of kilkul be'evri haguf, that the person is actually sick and ill. Not just that they're passionate about something and they're lacking it, like the chelis ava of Riyah in Elikus. Okay. Unfortunately, this section that we just learned doesn't need a lot of explanation, because this is something we see on a daily basis. This is what the world is busy with in most cases. Now, he's going further now. Ubezeh gufa, and in this itself, yes, Beis b'chinas. This itself has two levels of trying to find the right word, not spiritual illness. Yeah, this is a true illness on a spiritual level. So he says this too has two levels. It gets worse, yeah, before it gets better. So he's going to now identify a cheli sheyesh b'sakana and a cheli she'ein b'sakana. You could have a person who's very sick, God forbid, but they're not in their life is not in danger. And you could have another person whose life is in danger. And now he's going to discuss these two levels. So he says like this: in this itself, in this level of illness, where a person is completely consumed with the waste of this world, he says, one level is a person that's ill, but's in danger. For who? And what state is that? That the heat, or I could say the passion, and the alien fire, the alien desires, burning within him, Paul Etzley cause him they actually cause him to transgress on one of the ways, the paths of Torah, either by doing something that you're not supposed to do, sur merah, to avoid evil, or in something you're supposed to be doing, he won't be. In other words, either that he will be over on a mitzvah sleisus or a mitzvah sesa. He doesn't say mitzvahs, he says darke ha-Torah. It's an interesting expression. You don't see that so often. But basically, the Torah is telling you this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, this is what you shouldn't do, this is what you do. So chelish yesh b'sakona is not just that he's involved in the passions of this world, because you could be involved, like we say, it could be taivas heter even. He didn't say necessarily dvarim asurim. The fact is, however, you're indulging and completely consumed with the materialism of this world. So it could be to the extent that causes danger because he has either done something he shouldn't be doing, according to the Torah, or not done something he should be doing. This is when that strange and alien fire of the passions and desires of the animal soul have intensified and increased fashion to the point that they've caused them to cross the line, basically. Hivir means they made him cross over the line that the Torah has laid down. So Iverese means they've what's another word? They have another
Transgressed?
word. I used transgress before. I don't think transgress is
heavier. He transferred him like Eva and Noho.
Right. It caused them to cross over the line. Yeah. It's like it seduced him to another place that's not the Malkum of Kedusha, not the place of holiness. Al derech kene shemayim v'aretz abara esem b'shvila adam.
Would it be al das?
Al das. You're right. Al das koine. He is going against what the Eibishter wants. Koine shemayim v'aretz. Koine the Eibishter.
Yeah. One second. Actually, say. Actually, say al das kene. Right. I didn't read it right. Okay. Basically, he's going against it. It seduced him and drew him away. Al das kene. On the basically under the control and domain of kene, which is shamish's kene. Kene means
against.
God is our nest. Kene shemayim v'aretz ubara esam b'shvila adam. Kene referring to the one that acquires and essentially owns earth and heaven and earth, and created them for the person, for the human being. Ukameshikosav kizeh kol adam. This is the entire purpose of the person, to do what? To serve God. As Razal say, the whole world was created only l'tzavis lezeh.
To command him to do the mitzvahs, and he's doing that. To
command the human being to follow God.
To connect.
One second. We're going. I thought we determined that I'm going to try to teach this, and then this is disturbing other people who are learning. They're trying to create a flow. So let's just keep to what we determined. This is getting. I'm myself getting confused. Everybody. So let me say it the best I can, and then we'll stop, and everybody can explain. If I turn to you because I need help, then obviously. But let me just go through it, because there are many people listening, and we want to do this in a way that's productive for everyone. Okay. So he says like this. He's talking about now how this the flames and passion of the animal soul, to the point, are causing there are two types of chayli, I should say. One is the chayli that has danger. Why is it danger? Because it's not just someone who's consumed with the passions and even things that are destructive, but actually has now drawn him away from his purpose in life. So a person was created, that's what he's explaining now. A purpose was created. God created the Kene. God created us to serve God, to do mitzvahs. Brachas Davav Saf Amad Beis, page 6, the bottom of 6, end of 6b at the bottom. Va'odam nivra b'shvil kiyum ha-mitzvahs. A human being was created in order to perform mitzvahs. U'kamasha kasav anechi asisi eretz va'odam alel barasi. We learned this earlier as well. I made the earth, and va'odam alel barasi, and I created the human being on this earth. Put him there. And what is that? The gematria taryag. Barasi is gematria 613. Which means it's 613 mitzvahs. So this is all, right now the Rebbe Rashab is elaborating on why we're here, and how when we're drawn to the other side, we're actually defying our very nature and our very purpose of existence. We'll go back to it in a moment. Let me just continue reading. Like the Maimer Azal say, the end of Kedushin, the Mishnah, the whole world was created only to the Shamshani. The whole world was created only to serve me, which is the human being. Vani, and I, the human being, loy nivresi ela l'shamash keni. I was not created but for any other purpose than to serve Kaini, my master. Kaini means my nest, like Kaina from the word Kaina, like he said, from my owner, basically. The acquirer Kaina Shemayim Vares, the person who owns the world, the Eibishter. the tachlis hakavona, because the ultimate purpose, is to draw down the divine revelation in this world. As we explained earlier in the Maimed Dibra Mashal Shemaim Kisi. And now, goes back to the beginning of the point. After building the case of why we're here, and the purpose we're here, what's happening now? This cheli, this illness of obsession with this world and its material desires. So he says, and that has caused that he should be drawn and cross over the path, God forbid, the Goram Cheshach B'Yeser, and it causes a very profound and increased in darkness. So to go back to what we said before, he said it's a cheli sheyesh be'sakana. That's that the fire and the passion, the alien passion that's burning within the animal soul causes him to cross over from darkei atera. So the derech atera, you're on the path of Torah, and you've gone off the path. Either surmara or asay tev, doing something you shouldn't, or not doing something you should. And he said that is that hiverei say al das kene. In other words, it caused him to leave the kene, the path of his nest, of his healthy purpose in life. He explained the whole purpose, and now he's going back to what happens to this profound darkness. And it causes a darkness, that he placed the earth, the world, is placed within the heart of each individual. In other words, we are a microcosm, and we control the destiny of the entire world. The world is placed within our heart, within our control, so to speak. Through our work and service, we have the power to draw godliness in the world and therefore illuminate the world and let it live up and fulfill its purpose. Or, God forbid, the opposite. So what the Rebbe Rashab is doing is putting it in the context of why this is the stakes are so high. Because we either here to make the world healthier by us being healthier when we're aligned to the purpose for which we were created, Kainei, Aldas Kainei, or we wander off that path, which basically is what's called illness, where a healthy person is aligned with their purpose and everything is functioning smoothly. When a person wanders away from there, due to the passions, the fire, the heat, the temperature, the high temperature of the animal soul's passions that cause all the distortions we learned before, seeking out the waste, worshiping it, and in a way that actually that which is really sweet becomes bitter, that which is bitter becomes sweet, to the point of even consuming dangerous things. That's when we wander off and we carry the world with us, unfortunately, tragically. So that's a cheli sheyesh b'sakana. So what's the danger here? The danger is you're destroying yourself and the world. We're going to stop here. He's going to go next is to the cheli she'ein b'sakana. There's a lower level.
You missed one line.
I'm not going to read further. Oh,
no.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. V'zeh cheli sheyesh b'sakana, and this is an illness, an ill person that has danger. Shemisaken nafshe lemaves.
Lamus
or lemaves. Shemisaken nafshe, that he puts his nefesh in danger to death. A spiritual death, God forbid. Heaven protect us. Okay, so we'll stop here. He's going to go now to the cheli she'ein b'sakana, but we covered. Anybody want to ask anything?
Yes, it seems, am I misunderstanding this? But it seems like the Rebbe was talking about two sicknesses earlier, two levels, but they were both in a sense positive. You were desiring Elokus. One in Atzilus, you could see godliness with your Riyah in the mind, but you had such a desire for it, you became a Choles Ava. And then the second one, you're in Bria, where you're missing the Riyah completely. You have Bina, Shmiya. And then that seems like it's, even though it's a sickness, it seems like it's a positive thing because you're desiring God. All of a sudden, this third level, it seems like he turns it to a negative thing, totally negative. Am I understanding that or not?
I began the whole class with that point. Yes, he's talked about it in a positive way, like you could say, is the chelis ava of the divine soul in its yearning and aching. And now clearly he's talking about chela, the other extreme. He made it very clear. He's going now into the real chela. That's not just lacking godliness. Exactly right.
He's saying when you are losing the ear, then you could come to this real chela.
Well, we didn't talk about the Chet Egel right now. Now he's definitely talking about a chela that is lacking any divine revelation altogether. We'll still have to get back to why is it called chelas ava. Remember, this ava is that the chelas ava is that his desire, his love is for the wrong things. He's loving this world instead of God. The chelas ava we learned before was his love for God is so deep it causes him to be sick. Right. Now it's the love for the opposite of godliness. So yes, in a subtle way, it began because you moved from Riyah to Shmiya, but I don't want to go there. I mentioned, I don't want to address that. I want to just focus what we're learning right now. But It's absolutely correct that he's moved now to the other extreme of the Nefesh Habamis, of a real, like he calls, Cheli Gomor, not Cheli Bedakus. He actually used the word.
Only the first thing, this is not.
One second. We did not finish the subject, so I don't come to conclusions until we finish the whole subject. We'll see. Where he goes with this.
יש בייס לפנים, א' אוכל לסעבו, האחד שאלה בביתינו. והבייס בעבודו, ואומנם יש חלק גומר, רבו מכיר כל אברי הגוף.
So we'll see where he goes with this. Look, I don't come to conclusion until I finish it, so that I just want to state that. Okay.
I have a question that no one else does.
Go ahead.
Earlier in the class, we were talking about how humans can engage in such awful behavior, and because there's a tzimtzum and a withdrawal of godliness, but there's still sort of, there is some godly energy, and those that engage in real evil are feeding off of that godly energy. And I think you said, if this world, Alavai, this world were replenished, let's say like in Gan Eden, with complete godliness, that people wouldn't feed off that energy to do bad things. But we had the Chet Eitz Hadas. That's like the whole beginning of our downfall. So it's not necessarily, and humans have Bechira. So even it seems to me, I'm asking, even in a world, let's say when Mashiach comes, it seems like if we're still going to have Bechira, we could still mess up, no?
Once Mashiach comes and the world is put back to its original perfection, there won't no longer be the ability to choose something negative or evil. You could climb from good to better and even better, but there will be a point where God will remove Ruach HaTumah, all the negative energy, and it will only be positive energy.
So how
is that what you're asking?
In the Gan Eden, Eitz Hadas.
What Chet Eitz Hadas will be eliminated. That we will correct and repair that.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Simon, you had last night very tough questions. It was not easy. You did a good job. Wow, very tough questions. I saw some other rabbis answer some of the questions, but it did not reach your standards. Some of them said about Gilgulim, all kind of things which you mentioned. That the way that you said it is the way that Chassidus is saying it. You said it very beautiful.
Well, it comes from Chassidus, that I can tell you. It's not my own chachmas, but I appreciate it. Thank you. And people can watch the replay if you want to. It was a pretty powerful evening. Yeah.
Agreed.
Is it like an hour and a half?
Yeah.
It's a little shorter because we cut out some stuff. It's around an hour and 25 minutes.